Hey YouTube, welcome to my next Java tutorial, and today I want to be going over something called a for loop. Now a for loop is a very special type of loop, but before I even get into that, I want to explain the concept of looping. What is looping? Now basically what looping is telling the computer, hey, I want to do the same line of code over and over again until something else happens, or until I want it to stop. And that's really useful, especially with big programs. Now for example, actually no, I'm going to tell you what to do, and then I'm going to give you examples and more useful ways of using a loop. So here we go. So to create a loop, first thing we got to do is we have to write the word for. Now for, like when we type the word for, it tells the computer, hey, I'm starting a for loop. Now you write your parentheses, and notice inside your parentheses there's a bunch of weird code that you've never seen before. This is totally understandable, and I was the same way. So first thing we did though was we created a integer and we set it equal to 5. Now don't be overwhelmed that there's so much code inside here. When I break it down, it'll make a lot more sense. So this first thing we have to do is we write int j equals 5, or int, whatever you want equals 5. Now, what that is doing is kind of setting up our loop. Now, we can do that actually outside the loop. Like if I were to have int j equals 5 outside here and just have j as my first thing inside of my parentheses, it would work. But I'm just going to use this because that's usually the default way of doing it. Next, what I'm doing is telling the computer how long I want the loop to run. Now I'm saying I want the loop to run while it's greater than 0. So it's going to run until pretty much it hits 1, because 1 is still greater than 0. And that will be the last time that the loop runs. Now this j minus minus you guys have never seen before. And what that means is it's basically saying to the computer, hey, j minus equals 1. So, I didn't mean it like that, equals 1. So what I'm telling the computer now is every time this loop runs, I want j to subtract 1 from it, and keep doing that every time the loop runs. So now that we know what all that means, it's pretty simple how this works. So now I'm outputting the line j, and pretty much, or the variable j, and every time the loop runs, it will tell you what the value is. So now if we were to run this, it will go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there we go, simple as that. Now, that is the basic, very, very basic of programming, or looping, really. And what's cool is now, instead of doing this, like instead of writing system.println a billion times, or numbers like a giant, like a bunch of numbers on a screen, we can write, let's say, 1,000, and run it, and it'll output from 1,000 to 1. And that's what's cool about looping. It's very useful when you have a lot to do and you don't want to type it all. Now, also, another important thing to know is before I kind of like end this tutorial, the real reason why for loops exist is because you're using it to pretty much tell the computer, hey, I want this to run a very specific amount of times. Now, there's other loops that we can use, which will be in the next tutorial, but I want to say this now because later on you'll see that there'll be more useful ways to use loops other than for loops. For loops are good for, like I said, when you know exactly how much you want to like the loop to run, but later on you'll see that for loops aren't the most ideal way of doing it. So if you're going to make programs on what you already know from my tutorials, make sure that you just kind of have an understanding of the other loops before that, because, or watch my tutorials and keep watching them until you kind of see all the different loops, because until then it won't really make much, like you'll be just typing a bunch of random code. So until then, stay tuned, keep watching, and my next video will be up probably tomorrow, so stay tuned guys.